What the fox? Hey there everyone, and welcome back to another video, and a first in the What the Fox series. My attempt to find my channel's identity and style, plus an explanation and analysis of my own work. We all know, as artists, we can be our own worst critics. It's all too easy to bash our work, rather than simply stepping back and working out the problems like a puzzle, so we can eventually step forward and improve. So it's my hopes by making this series I'll be able to figure out how to do just that and show my progress as a growing artist, and hopefully encourage you to improve alongside me. Just remember, the number one rule: never give up! With that, let's get on with it. So to start with, I did forget to record the start of this. I already had the head roughly the way I wanted. As you can see on the left of the screen, I have a reference to help me draw it. Always use references. These are vitally important tools for an artist, more so than you might realise. Whether it's working out the angles, proportions, or even the colours, references help to streamline the process and reduce mistakes along the way. Oh, the little stubby legs. In all seriousness, the legs were giving me serious problems to start with. So there's the first point of improvement: study animal anatomy. Having trouble with the legs, I moved to the face. Good practice if something is giving you trouble, either work on a different part or take a 5-minute break. It never helps to bash your head against the wall and get frustrated, and oftentimes a quick break is all you really needed. I'm so proud of that face. He honestly looks proud of himself, to be honest. I imagine he must be enjoying a lovely autumn breeze against his fur. Sadly, due to getting frustrated, I stopped recording for a short time. I managed to improve it by simply changing the position of the body. You can definitely see I felt more confident after doing so, even to the point where I didn't mind experimenting with slight variations and paw placement. Again, the reference helped amazingly, even though the paws were obscured by the leaves on the photo. After that, I thought the fox could do with a friend, so I added a cute bunny. Even trying different poses and styles without being scared of erasing it and starting again, eventually landing on this cutie. Speaking of styles, I definitely prefer sketchy, angular line art with some curves every now and again to break the repetition. If I could say what my biggest weakness was when it came to painting, it would be choosing a colour palette. So I addressed this by making 3 smaller copies and testing different colours out. The first was more stereotypical of a fox's colour. The second was darker to match more with the autumnal theme I was going for. Whereas the third was testing something entirely different, more closely resembling what I had in mind in my head when I started this, a coffee themed piece, the fox being a latte and the bunny being cream. I tried a final time on the larger piece expecting to move on to the full colouring, but I wasn't very happy with it, to be honest. And here I experimented with figuring out the lighting, which I felt quite happy with, even if it wasn't perfect. Here I finally start laying down the colour, keeping everything on separate layers to allow clipping masks later and for better control of the painting. I do feel as though I over-render the background later, so definitely another point to improve. What could have also worked better would be to add slightly more saturation to the back without added rendering. Due to it being in the background, sharp contrasting edges shouldn't really be visible to the viewer. And this is where I feel most of my mistakes start to occur. Rendering is another point of weakness for me. As stated before, I definitely over-rendered the background and didn't quite get the lighting right. But I am happy with the stylistic choice in places, like the scratchy look on the tail and the legs. Or the cyan and purple colours I added into the fur for a little more pop. And there, it's done. Overall, I'm happy, but I also know there's a lot more that could have been done better. So, let's take a look at that together and figure out what went wrong and what I can do to improve it. Okay, to start with what's wrong, I started making notes on top of the drawing. Here we see I'm making notes on the highlights. There's not many highlights here and it clearly doesn't catch the light properly where it should do. As a result, the piece winds up looking flat and boring. There's no life or energy to it. I definitely could have done better by just adding a little bit of bloom lighting or just something around the rim. With this next one, I'm not entirely happy with it. I think next time I may cut this bit out, and that is the protrusions that come from the background. I think next time I won't have elements pop out from the frame. I think otherwise it becomes a little bit too distracting from the piece. It's not to say that it can't work, as it can actually work. It gives the impression that the characters are walking out of the frame. And with the added elements of the trees and the leaves popping out of that same frame, it gives the impression that that world they're from is much grander than what we can currently perceive. The next one is noting down our secondary light source. Now, I didn't really make good use of this as I didn't add a rim light to the edge of the character, indicating where this secondary source is. And as for the rabbit, well, unfortunately I didn't do a very good job with that as well. The rendering was poor and even the colour choice was terrible. Overall, the rendering could have been done much better with that part of the element. Here I could have benefited by adding some occlusion shadow to the tree line to give the impression where the light just couldn't quite get to. Here I'm indicating where the primary light source is coming from, mostly from the front casting onto the fox. I didn't quite get this right either, as the light is slightly too dull. It's also not spread across the forms properly, which makes it difficult to convey what is a curved surface or a flat surface. Here it feels like there's way too much detail, or the detail hasn't been put in the right places or spread too far out of the needed areas. There should be a focus on the face of the fox first, all other areas should be secondary in detail. Not to the point of being under-rendered, but to the point where it's just not quite distracting. The point of the painting is to guide the viewer's eye. Always remember that. Composition is one of the key elements. Next up, the values. These are also another important element to get right in a painting. Get them wrong and it can wind up either looking too flat or too chaotic. So let's pick the colours and see what's going on. As we can see here, I'm picking the values from the background, seeing just how far they range. It's a good value set, but let's check the character and see what happens with that. As we can see, here's our first mistake. The values of the character and the values of the background are far too close to one another. This makes the entire thing look flat. Each element is not separated from one another, and as a result, if you're looking at value alone, it's hard to distinguish from one to the other. And as for the values for the rabbit, well, I don't think I need to have to tell you, it's looking far too bright. As a result, it stands out far too much. It also doesn't match the values of the fox. As a result, it doesn't feel like they're part of the matching scene. And here I'm marking up the two zones of light and shadow. Having a good balance of these two zones allows the person to convey form much more effectively. Here you can see I colour pick two different greys, one from the light and one from the dark, and when I bounce between the two, you can see there's a very good range to them. The piece would have been enhanced far better if I knew how to balance this value better. And as stated earlier, the rabbit has been poorly done. It has too little contrast for its own character, but has too much contrast in regards to the rest of the piece. As a result, stands out far too much. And here I've cut the background into diagonally to show where the light source splits between the light and the dark values. I'm quite happy with this, so I wouldn't really change anything about that. And here are the main areas that I believe the light should have been hitting. I do believe I could have done a better job by adding a bit more bloom to the area, give it the impression that the light is bouncing off and glowing. I believe I could have also trimmed up other areas or added extra bits just to try and level it out a bit better or just improve the overall lighting. This next bit is more to do with the flow of the piece. The places where the viewer's eye will move from one place to another. In this case, it starts from the fox's face, heads down towards the chest where some detail is, heading towards where the rabbit is, before following the gaze of the rabbit back to the fox's head. This creates an aesthetically pleasing loop. So now the question is, can I do better? The obvious answer is, of course I can, in the same way that you can, if you just practice and try and learn from your mistakes. So the better question is, how can I improve? And that is where people get tripped up on, including myself. In this case, I try to do a little bit of research to see if I can change my art style or just simply make it a bit better. In this case, I looked at my traditional art. I started by looking at the Charmander watercolour painting I did for my nephew. I also looked at tutorials by Sims Art. The link to that video is listed down below. But this helped immensely when trying to learn how to emulate watercolour on a digital medium. So after extracting the information and trying to figure out how to do it, this is what I came out with. Already I feel so much happier with this result, it just feels so much closer to my own art style, especially traditionally. So as a result, I'm going to try and put this to the Lineart and see what difference it actually makes. However, I'm afraid that'll have to wait till the next time. This video is getting quite long and I've been spending quite a bit of time editing it, so until next time, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope the resources in this video proved useful to you. Until the next one, bye!